You looking forward to Florida or what?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not looking forward to the crazy travel between Florida and Edmonton, but yeah, I think it's going to be an amazing series. Neither of these teams fluked their way in, right? They both feel like they absolutely deserve to be here. And the other thing is that they've both been through the battle. They both come close. They've been through a lot of playoff rounds and come up short. So I think we're in for some incredible hockey.
Well, let's spin this into the Maple Leafs conversation. You look at these two teams, Foxy. Do you think the Leafs are anywhere close to these two right now?
No, I don't. And it started in the second round. I tried to envision how the Maple Leafs would fare in some of the second round series, and I don't think they would have escaped any of them. I think it's just the way they play, the way they're built. I don't think their goaltending is strong enough, to survive some of these games, and just how organized and disciplined the teams are in terms of sticking to their structure, how they don't get flustered when things get down. I don't think they're in the elite of the elite yet.
So what do you think they need to do to improve? And is it fair to sort of pin this failure on one player?
No, it's not fair to pin it on one player, Stewie. Not at all. If anything, I'm pinning it on management for their idea of roster construction, right? That it was such a it was a bold idea. And it was interesting at first. Like, can you build a team that is so focused on offense, pouring all of not all, but a huge chunk, more than any organization has done before, into four forwards and a defenseman whose main attribute is offense in Morgan Riley? Can you do it that way? And then just, are you smart enough to find enough bargains and pinch pennies on the role players, pinch pennies on goaltenders, and go scrambling for a goalie every offseason? And for a couple of years, it was like, I was intrigued. I was like, can they do it this way? This is, are they thinking ahead of where the game's going? Is the game going so far offense, so far possession, that you could actually get it done this way? But after a few tries, it became apparent that it's a flawed way of thinking. And now I feel like they're a step behind. They probably should have fired the coach a while ago and got a different voice in there. They probably should have made a move to act on the core four before the no movement clauses kicked in and their hands are tied. It's like, what are you going to do with Mitch Marner? And the Mitch Marner conversation, and I know that's who you mean, Stu, when you're talking about the one player, and he's taking a lot of flack, especially on social media. But it's not about it being his fault. It's about he's the only one you could possibly move, because John Tavares' value isn't there. There's no way with the family that he wants to move and waive it. That's pretty clear. You've already committed all your money to Nylander and Matthews. So Marner remains the question mark. And that's not so much, hey, and I know part of the storyline is, hey, he didn't perform in the playoffs, but I think it's more about, hey, are you going to keep banging your head against the wall, give this guy as much money as Nylander, and keep pinching pennies on the blue line? Or are you going to spread the pie a little bit more evenly?
Well, that's exactly it right there. And I think my follow-up question was something you brought up, Brendan Shanahan. I'll say it, Stewie, you're not going to back it up. I don't know how this guy still has a job, because he's overseeing this whole thing, and it's the same shit every year, Luke.
Well, the reason why he still has a job is because he's under contract. And I think
Yeah.
Keith Pelly, it comes in, he's new. Hey, I could fire him and pay him not to work, or I can, try and get to learn how he works, get to learn the business through him. But there's no doubt. I mean, I think it was evident at that locker cleanout press conference where Pelly was actually at the podium alongside Treliving and Shanahan, that for the first time, he wasn't the most powerful man at the season ender, right? It felt like, okay, now I have someone I have to report to, not some sort of faceless board that I can convince because I know more about hockey than them. All of a sudden, he has a direct boss, one guy he has to impress. So I think the reason why he wasn't fired is, hey, we're paying him anyway. Let's just see how it goes. And all of a sudden, his tune has changed, right? He was the guy who was like, no, we believe in these guys. They're eventually going to push through. And now, for the first time in any summer, they're like, everything's on the table, which is really interesting.
So where do you think the priorities are in roster construction for Tree Living and staff this offseason? Do you see them prioritizing Bertuzzi and Domi, or can they afford to keep both or one? What's your opinion on that?
I don't think they can afford to keep both. Maybe one. I think it depends on the guys, how much of a discount they're willing to take. But they're going to be. They're not. The Leafs aren't the only team that's going to be interested, and I don't think it should be their number one priority to bring Bertuzzi and Domi back. Even though I really liked their playoffs, I liked how they started slow and finished strong. I think the guys loved them in the room. Like, I thought they were a good fit. I just think if you're going to spend your dollars, it has to be on the blue line. It has to be on someone who can help Joseph Woll in net, because Samsonov's gone. And Joseph Woll, there's major question marks about how healthy he can stay. This guy's never played so much as 40 games, let alone being a number one. Like, you need some sort of support there. So that's a priority. And the white whale forever has been a right shot to play with Morgan Riley. And I think that, but I think they'll do it. Like, there's enough defensemen out there in free agency that I think they will get at least one, probably two on the open market.
Yeah, I think the two names to watch for in free agency are going to be Brandon Montour, who we're going to see in the Stanley Cup final here, and Brett Pesce, I think, automatic is a two. Like, I'm with you. I think they're going to get a guy. And ultimately, I think that makes a guy like Morgan Riley better. I know a lot of people have thrown him a bit out there, but I don't think it would make sense to move a Morgan Riley right now, especially with that contract. But this is a unique question, too. What do you think is more of a pressing need for the Leafs this summer? Would it be defense or goaltending?
Defense, I'd say. The goaltending market's interesting, though, because basically, like, Samsonov might be one of the most coveted UFAs, because otherwise you're looking at guys that are pure backups. I think the Leafs would probably kick tires on Laurent Brossoit. Great season, but again, he's not a guy that's going to carry the mail for you. But he's a proven veteran coming off a strong year. Anthony Stolarz, really strong, UFA. But again, how's he going to look playing behind the Leafs defense compared to Florida's defense? I mean, Florida's the best defensive team in the whole league. That team-wise, they just lock things down. They make it easy on their goalies. Just ask Bobrovsky. Like, he loves how easy they make it on him. So how would Stolarz look on his next team? I don't know, but he's going to be a name out there. The biggest goalie names are actually through trade. You're looking at Allmark, maybe Saros. I know Barry Trotz is going to take a run at him, but you have to think that there's a way to get him if a team wants him bad enough. And then Markstrom. But I would think that the Leafs would probably prioritize D over goalie. And it might be another patchwork situation. A lot of crossing their fingers that Joseph Woll finds a way to maybe change his training regimen or something and just finds a way to stay healthy. Because when he's good, like when he's healthy, he's great.
What are your thoughts on the Craig Berube hire? And he was preaching accountability. What's your opinion on the accountability that he can do with this roster? I don't think you can sit a superstar in the stands for 2-3 games. What are your thoughts on what Craig Berube is going to bring to this Maple Leaf squad?
Yeah, I like the hire. Like, of all the guys that were available, I think he's the best choice. I do think they probably should have made a change like this a year ago, 2 years ago, and got a different voice in there. I hope he makes them uncomfortable. One of the big problems is I think the guys were very comfortable with Keefe. They needed their cage rattled a little bit. So just having someone different, I think it's been a bit overblown about how, he's good. He's the polar opposite. I think he is a good communicator. You talk to guys who play with him before. He does like to build relationships with the guys. And I think the accountability thing is fun to sell. I think it skews the perception of, oh, Keefe wasn't holding them accountable or something. And I don't think that's entirely accurate. And the other thing is, I think the biggest change will be stylistically. Forget the accountability. I think how he wants them to play. Like, in his presser, he was saying, we're going to go north. We're not going to lose a single puck battle. That type of stuff was a bit different. Keefe really prioritized possession. I think you're going to see less like, okay, let's cycle back. Let's regroup. And I think it'll be more straight ahead. And if guys aren't doing that, I think maybe that's where they see their ice time chopped. I think we're going to see less of a discrepancy between the top 6 ice time and the bottom 6 ice time. I think that's where Berube can make a difference.
You're right, because I think you look back to that Stanley Cup victory, that was my lasting memory, is the depth. Alex Steen was on that fourth line, and Berube was not afraid to play his fourth line. He was not afraid to make some changes. The back end, obviously, Binnington was a big story as well, and I think you're right. That's the biggest difference for this team, is stylistically how much different they're going to look. What was it like to cover this team on a daily basis? I mentioned it before you came on. It's always unique to get the perspective of somebody who's around them all the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's a privilege, right? Like you're covering a team that has the most eyeballs on it. So that's great in a sense. I mean, I could go on a long tangent on what it's like to cover the Leafs. What I would say is, especially this year, what I noticed is it was refreshing going into the other team's room, because often you would walk into the visitors' room at Scotiabank, or you'd go on the road and go and see that the opposing team, and there'd be a whole bunch of guys sitting at their stall ready to talk, and the reporters could kind of spread out, have more one-on-one conversations. There was a little bit more accessibility, particularly with the stars. I wouldn't include Tavares and Riley so much in this, but particularly with the stars, there's a little bit of sheltering them. I think they were like, the team was cognizant of how much they had to talk. So we're only doing scrums. There was a little bit of protection. They weren't readily available as some other team stars are. I'd put it that way.
So I work with, a lot of the NHL players that are from the Toronto area in the off season, and they always blast me like, you're always talking about Toronto. They're nowhere close. And, for me, I'm a Toronto sports fan and want to see them be successful. And I just want to ask, like, what makes next year different in your opinion?
Yeah, well, the coach for sure. And I think if they actually pull off a blockbuster, I think that would be different. The one thing I would say is, it feels like the coach and the GM are in alignment. And the last year it was like Treliving was kind of, well, Keefe's a good coach, and he is. Let's see how this works. Let's see if we can find a way. Whereas now it's like, okay, I've handpicked this coach. This guy views the game the same as I do. He likes his teams big and mean and rough, and is okay with grinding out, 2-1 victories. And I think we saw a little bit of that in Treliving's deadline moves, and the Leafs actually played some fantastic defensive hockey late in the Boston series. But I think what's going to be different is we're going to see that all year. So maybe Austin isn't threatening 70 goals. Like maybe we actually see a different style of play. And I think that will be further reflected in what free agents they target, trade guys they acquire via trade. I think the roster could see some change. And I'm also looking forward to the next step of Nyes, Benoit, McMahon. Like I think there were some positive stories lower down the lineup this season that I'm excited to see if they can take the next step.
And on top of that, Easton Cowan and Fraser Minton, how they look in training camp. I mean, Cowan had an all-world CHL season, so did Minton. Maybe they factor in the fall as well. Just to wrap, what's your general read on the whole Mitch Marner situation? We've talked about the PR battle that's underway firmly the last couple days with Darren Ferris leaking something. Now, Brad Treliving with the response. What's your read? Do you think something happens here? Do you think Marner's a Leaf come the fall?
I think there's a chance he is. Honestly, it feels like 50-50 to me, and really it's up to Mitch. The only leverage Treliving and company have is how much pressure they're willing to put on him publicly. And it doesn't look like they are. That hasn't been the Leafs way. They like to do business behind closed doors. But I think the biggest signal to me was with flashback a year ago, and Treliving came right out and said, our biggest priority is re-signing Austin and Willie. He never deviated from that public line of, we need to get these guys under contract. We believe in them. He never strayed from that. And right off the bat, he's saying, we need to make our team better. He's saying Mitch is a good player, but he's not saying our number one priority is to re-sign him. And that is a totally different tone than when Matthews and Nylander were up.
Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long form interviews, we got clips, we got epic rants by Jay Roseau. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.